Once again, welcome to VSA with me, Blessings Mosugu. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission is concerned about the spate of insecurity and violence, including clashes among supporters of political parties and the candidates in the forthcoming governorship elections in Imo State, Bayelsa, and Kogi State, scheduled to hold on the 11th of November. Now, aside being concerned about insecurity, there also is the issue of political parties' refusal to substantially submit the list of their agents, despite notices and subsequent reminders. Well, joining us to have this conversation now, I have with me in the studio Olufemi Lawson, an Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability. Thank you so much, Olufemi, for joining us.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you join us as well. Now, speaking of the forthcoming elections, governorship elections, Olufemi, campaigns have been launched across the state, but there are major concerns about security fears. Why exactly is that?
It's very unfortunate that whenever we talk about elections in Nigeria, you always have to be concerned about the security of elections, security of other people, and even in most cases where society have run, in a very, peaceful manner. When an election comes, you see politicians coming to create tensions unnecessarily and escalating issues to the extent that what is ordinarily supposed to be a purely civil affair, becomes chaotic, at some point looks like war. And that is why the INEC, stakeholders and security agencies are raising these concerns. And I want to be particular about some of those states, but the INEC have raised concern, particularly Kogi and Bayelsa. For Bayelsa State, for anyone who has followed the political trajectory of Bayelsa, this is practically like the first time in about a long time. The elections are just about 1 month away, and you are not finding a chaotic atmosphere like it used to be. And one thing is responsible for this, and that is what I think election should be about. Governance. Governance must be able to entrench peace in every society. And that is the only way that when even elections come, you don't have fear of insecurity like we're currently having in some of these states. In Bayelsa State, you realize that unlike the past, now you have a leadership that is investing so much in peace in the state. If you look at until very recently, that state used to be in the news for hostilities, for militancy, and all sort of activities that made election look like war. But if there are circumstances that have necessitated this fear now, like we're currently witnessing in Bayelsa, in Kogi, of course, relatively in Imo, it is due to the desperation of politicians. And we must ask, why are politicians becoming desperate to win election while trying to create tension? It is because in most cases, when politicians see that they are not popular, among the people, they try to create an atmosphere that will send the people away, scare them from exercising their franchise to the extent that election can be easily manipulated. And that is why we have continually insisted and advised INEC that it must do whatever it has to do within its best to rein in these desperate politicians to the extent that they must understand that the people hold the ace. Whenever election is holding, the people must decide and must determine, what happens during election, not an individual whose ambition is beginning to look like is the ultimate and is more superior to the aspiration of the people. And that is why these concerns are being raised, and which is hoped that the security agencies, most particularly, and other stakeholders will see these warning signs that are emerging and begin to take seriously the issue of our election security, not only by ensuring that there are peaceful campaigns, there are peaceful elections, to the extent that perpetrators of violence during our elections are made to face the law. Why I think issues of insecurity is becoming heightened today is because in the past, we've seen politicians who have perpetrated violence during election, who have sponsored violence during election, still walking free on our streets. Some of them are back on the ballot, still aspiring to contest election in states like Bayelsa, because in the past, government have failed to deal with people who perpetrate violence during election. So moving forward, I believe government at all levels must now take seriously dealing with people who perpetrate violence during elections. And that's one way that we can have elections in atmosphere that do not look like war.
Right. Okay. What also can you say about the delay of these political parties in submitting their agent list? Why the delay?
Well, some of these political parties participating in these elections are just there to, make up the numbers. In some states you find about 18, as much as 18 political parties contesting election into the seat of the governorship, and you realize that only about 1, 2, or in most cases 3 of such are seriously into this business. A lot of them cannot even boast of having agents across the local government, across the electoral wards and polling unit. And that is why they keep foot dragging, keep pushing it forward, asking INEC to give more time. But any serious political party participating in an election that is just about 30-something days away should by now have had a complete list of his agents, an election, officials for the party and the likes submitted by now. It shows on seriousness on the part of these political parties, those that are yet to submit, the complete list of their agents. And it's one of the reasons why people keep, advocating that the business of elections should be more serious than it is. It is not about having this huge number of political parties, but why don't we look at having serious political parties that will not unnecessarily put burden on the Electoral Commission, that will make the job of the Electoral Commission easier than what we are currently experiencing.
All right. There's also the situation where political parties are demanding equity and fairness in the forthcoming polls. Do you think that this stems from the past occurrences, especially with INEC and the lack of accountability there?
Yeah, it is true. INEC have a duty to be transparent in this election. Again, I want to be particular about Bayelsa State. Only recently, the resident electoral commissioner in that state came out and stated that election will be transmitted manually from polling unit. And stakeholders, including our organizations, raised concern. It is good that INEC has come to deny that and debunk that claim by the resident electoral commissioner, because if you look at issues around the 2023 general election, it borders more on the transparency of the process. Despite the investment by INEC, despite the commitment shown by INEC, despite the investment put in by political parties and stakeholders, the lack of transparency in some aspect of the election has affected the credibility of that election. And today, if you go to Bayelsa, if you go to Kogi, if you go to Imo State, what the people are demanding is credible election. The will of the people must be allowed to prevail in this election. INEC has a duty to rein in its officials and ensure that they are not compromised by politicians. In Bayelsa, there are a lot of desperate attempts by politicians, to hijack the process, compromise electoral officials, and that is why across the state, citizens are making a lot of noise, making a lot of advocacy and awareness, demanding that and the first way to ensure transparency in these elections is that INEC must ensure that accreditation is transparent, is electronic as mandated. Transmission of election results are made to be electronic. We've done this in Edo. Good, it is an off-season election. It's not a general election. So there would not be so much issue of logistic and inadequacy of some of these tools needed to transmit election results. In Edo State, by the time it was 4 p.m. during the last governorship election, there were virtually results from almost all the polling units in the state. In Ondo State during the off-season election, the same circumstance. So we are believing that in Bayelsa and other states where these elections will be holding on November 11, INEC should be able to prepare itself to the extent that it implements the use of electronic accreditation, transmission of results, and that the people will have the confidence that their will, their wishes, manifest in the outcome of the election.
Right. Now, we understand that INEC is decrying insecurity, but there are some parts of this state that we have mentioned that are literally lost to insecurity. For example, if we come back to Imo State, we did mention Imo State before, the Olu community and some other places like that. We know that we know these places for insecurity and violence. So why is it that the INEC cannot, from now, start finding, just like you mentioned earlier, start finding places that are safe, at least to some extent, where this voting can be done?
You see, the idea of where voting will take place is a matter of constitution. These are guided by the electoral laws. It is not enough, except in circumstances like we have with the IDPs in insurgency, ravaged area. There are designated places for elections to take place as provided for by the law. It is very unfortunate that we are currently experiencing what we are seeing in Imo, in some part of Imo State today, due to the activities of militia groups. But the state has a responsibility because it is not the job of INEC to provide security. There are other stakeholders in the electoral chain that are mandated to provide security. But the state must do whatever it has to do within its own capacity to ensure that the state is secured enough for citizens and for the election. Let me give you an instance. Before now, if elections are to be conducted in Bayelsa State, it used to look like a battlefield. It used to look like a preparation for war. But why does it look so calm today in Bayelsa, and you are not hearing issues or news of rocket launching, gunshot, even except for some few instances that have been tackled? The incumbent administration in the state took it as a priority to institutionalize peace in the state. What do I mean? The government prioritized, existence of peace to the extent that communities were made to live together, citizens were made to live harmoniously prior to election. We must not be working towards peace because of election. We must ensure that the states are secured and communities are secured with or without election. And that is what is helping states like Bayelsa today. And that is why, communities are not displaced. Virtually every community in Bayelsa and Kogi will be voting from their primary constituencies. So it is expected that Imo State also do more than it is doing to ensure that the state becomes secured enough for the citizens to exercise their franchise on November 11.
Right. Now, as the Executive Director for Center of Accountability, would you say that the people are carried along well enough in this electoral process?
The job of engaging the people ordinarily should be the job of the political parties and other stakeholders, just like the civil society, the media. You have been doing a fantastic job in educating the people, in sensitizing the people ahead of this election. But what are the political parties doing? A lot of times we don't find political parties coming to the people until their elections are a few days away. INEC is also doing its best by engaging people. But I think the political parties have to do more in voters' education and sensitization as it is expected of them. While INEC should also work more with the media and the civil society in creating awareness and building trust. Because when there is no trust between INEC and the people, it becomes so difficult for people to have trust in the process. It becomes so difficult for people to even show the willingness to participate in the election. So that is why I believe strongly that INEC must do more by engaging the media, the civil society, and of course the political parties in the area of voters' education ahead of these elections.
So speaking of distrust, it's obvious that there is a little bit of distrust for INEC because of what happened, obviously. So in your own opinion, would you suggest that these votes, this time around, be transmitted in real time? Or do we still go along with the digitalization of the process and all that?
We will continue to advocate for digitalization of the process. It has, every available records have shown that elections are more transparent when results are transmitted real time, where people easily know where the direction of their votes, goes, rather than, when it is shrouded in secrecy. It has to be determined at some collation center, sometimes where in the thick of the night. So it is important that we keep advocating that our electoral process becomes digitalized, that people can get accredited, just like we are saying, using the Bermuda voters accreditation system. Elections should also advance to that stage, and to the point that real time, when elections are conducted and voting is completed, people can easily know where they have voted, people can easily know who they have voted for, and there can be results real time without unnecessarily waiting for overnight announcement of result like we have seen in most circumstances.
All right. Before we let you go, I would like to ask, are we expecting, or are you, in your own opinion, expecting any dramatic outcome of these elections in any of the states, and why, if there is any?
Well, it is going to be determined solely on the will of the people. The people are sensitized. I've been to some of these states, and I was in Bayelsa State recently doing some advocacy with some civil society organizations ahead of these elections. there are indications that the people are determined, they are ready, and they are willing to maintain, to vote in a peaceful atmosphere. Let me put it that way. Because of what they have enjoyed over the past few years, the people are more interested in a peaceful society that where their economic activities that can thrive, where they can live without fear, where they can live without unnecessary fear of terror from state actors and non-state actors. So it is expected that across this state where these elections will be taking place, that the will of the people will be allowed to prevail. And INEC will not allow desperate politicians to compromise the process. It is also a message that the security agencies must not allow themselves to be used against the people in truncating their will. If this is done, it is very sure that come November 11, the people will speak across the states, and of course, their aspirations will manifest.
All right, Olufemi Lawson, Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability. Thank you so much for joining us in Political Africa.
My pleasure.
You're still watching VSA with us, and when we come back, we'll take a look at the precarious situation of the refugees in DR Congo, especially the women. Stay with us.